Lumen point. Let's begin the breakdown.
Let's talk about one of the most iconic figures of our time, a guy who literally changed the world from his parents' garage. But this isn't just another success story. Oh no. This is about how the very same mindset that can build an empire can also destroy the person who built it.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Those were the last words spoken by Steve Jobs. Kind of mysterious, right? Full of wonder. It just leaves you asking, what did he see in those final moments? To even begin to understand, we have to dive into the unique and often really contradictory life that he lived.
And this really is the central puzzle of Steve Jobs, isn't it? He had this almost supernatural ability to bend reality to his will. It's a power that gave us some of the most revolutionary tech in history. But what happens when you turn that same power against an enemy you can't just outthink or persuade?
To really get the genius and the flaw, we have to go right back to the beginning. We need to see how his very unique way of looking at the world was pieced together, bit by bit, through a whole series of, well, let's call them unconventional choices.
I mean, look at this. His early life was just a whirlwind. He drops out of a fancy college, treks to India to find himself, and then comes back to start a tech revolution in a suburban garage. Every single one of these steps was a major detour from the typical path to success.
And this idea, this philosophy, is captured perfectly by one little story. So after dropping out of Reed College, he didn't actually leave. He just started dropping in on classes he found interesting. One of them was calligraphy. Seemed totally useless at the time, right? But years later, that very specific knowledge of beautiful fonts became a core feature of the first Macintosh. It's literally why our computers and phones look the way they do today.
You know, that trip to India really did change him. He came back with this deep belief that intuition was way more powerful than intellect. He famously said he didn't bother with market research. Why? Because, in his words, customers don't know what they want until you show it to them. His gut feeling was his compass, and for a very long time, it was almost never wrong.
So as you can imagine, this unusual approach led to a pretty wild ride for Apple in the early days. It's a time filled with these incredible wins, but also some really deep personal contradictions. It all came to a head when he was fired from the very company he started.
And nothing, I mean nothing, shows this disconnect better than the Lisa computer, which Apple launched in 1983. Now, Jobs swore up and down the name was an acronym, but come on, everyone knew it was named for his daughter, Lisa, the same daughter whose paternity he was denying in court at that exact moment. A DNA test later proved he was the father. The computer was a huge flop, and his relationship with his daughter was broken for decades.
So in 1985, after losing a big boardroom showdown, he's out, forced out of Apple. But he didn't just fade away, not at all. He started a new computer company, Next, and then he did something really interesting. He bought a tiny computer graphics division from George Lucas and renamed it Pixar. He personally drove the creation of Toy Story, obsessing over every detail. It just proved his genius wasn't just about computer hardware. Okay, so fast forward to 1997. Apple is on life support, just months away from going bankrupt. And then, in one of the most stunning comebacks in business history, the company buys Next, which brings Steve Jobs back home as CEO. What happened next was, well, legendary. His return was announced to the world with this incredible ad campaign, Think Different. And it was so much more than a tagline. It was a whole new mission statement. Jobs was basically injecting his own rebellious identity right back into Apple's DNA. He was signaling to the world that the era of boring beige computers was officially over. And then, the products started coming. Working hand in glove with the brilliant designer Johnny Ive, he just unleashed this unbelievable string of hits. The iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. Every single one of these didn't just sell well, they created entirely new industries and completely changed the way we live and work.
He was at the absolute summit of his career, a modern-day titan. But then he was faced with a problem that you couldn't redesign or re-engineer, a problem you couldn't market your way out of. And this is the moment where his greatest strength becomes his most tragic, fatal flaw.
So to understand what happened, you have to know about something called the reality distortion field. It was kind of an inside joke among his engineers, but it was very real. Jobs had this uncanny ability to convince anyone, including himself, that the impossible was in fact possible, and he used this power to push his teams to do amazing things.
Here's a classic example of it working.
He once cornered an engineer and told him that shaving 10 seconds off the max startup time would save dozens of lives over the product's lifetime. The engineer, who at first said it couldn't be done, came back a week later having cut 28 seconds off the boot time. But when he was diagnosed with a very treatable form of pancreatic cancer in 2003, he tried to apply that same exact logic to his own body.
For 9 critical months, he flat out refused the surgery that his doctors were begging him to have, a surgery they said would save his life. Instead, he tried to cure himself with things like acupuncture, special diets, fruit juices. He was trying to bend a biological reality that just wouldn't bend.
You know, his biographer, Walter Isaacson, he just explained it perfectly. Jobs truly believed that if you just ignored something unpleasant, if you just refused to accept it, it would go away. This magical thinking had worked for him his entire life. It built Apple. But when it came up against cancer, it was a death sentence. By the time he finally agreed to the surgery, it was too late. The cancer had spread.
Even in his final years, as his health got worse, he just kept working. His story really forces us to look at the messy, complicated nature of genius and the kind of legacy it leaves in its wake.
In August of 2011, he finally resigned as CEO of Apple. The letter just said, "That day has come." Less than 2 months later, he was gone, at the age of just 56. And the man whose name and designs were on billions of devices around the world was, by his own request, buried in an unmarked grave.
And yet, it's not like he hadn't thought about it. In a famous speech years earlier, he called death life's change agent, this brilliant invention that makes room for progress. It's such a profound idea, especially coming from a man who spent his whole life creating the new.
But maybe his most powerful legacy, the part that really sticks with people, is this simple piece of advice. This was the rule that guided him through everything: getting fired, facing bankruptcy, tackling impossible challenges. It's a call to action that still inspires millions of people today.
Which leaves us right back where we started, with this really tough question. Steve Jobs bent reality to create the future for all of us. He changed the world by just refusing to accept its limits. But in the end, that exact same refusal cost him everything. It's a powerful and honestly an unsettling reminder of the true price of genius. Fuel your curiosity, subscribe for the explanation, stay for the knowledge.